So I, 28F, live in a duplex with paper-thin walls. My neighbor Gary, 40s, has been going through what I assumed was a rough patch with his wife Linda. Lots of shouting, doors slamming, the works. I felt bad but minded my own business because I'm not the type to get involved in other people's drama. Oh, how naive I was. For context, I work in tech and mostly keep to myself. The most exciting thing that usually happens in my life is when my sourdough starter gets too active. Gary and Linda moved in about 2 years ago. Gary's this soft-spoken accountant who always waves when he sees me. Linda always seemed a bit high maintenance, but I try not to judge. Last Tuesday, I'm working from home debugging some particularly stubborn code when I hear Gary sobbing through the wall. Like, ugly crying that made my chest hurt just listening to it. I'd heard arguments before, but this was different. This was the sound of a man's soul breaking. Being the bleeding heart I am, I decided to bake him some cookies and check on him. My mom always said food fixes everything, and even if it doesn't fix it, at least you're not facing your problems on an empty stomach. Gary answers the door looking like he hasn't slept in weeks. His hair was sticking up at weird angles. He had on the same wrinkled shirt I'd seen him in yesterday, and his eyes were so red and puffy he looked like he'd been pepper sprayed. I offered the cookies and asked if he was okay. This man just breaks down right there in the doorway. Starts telling me everything while I'm standing there with my plate of chocolate chip cookies feeling completely out of my depth. Apparently Linda has been having an affair, cleaned out their joint bank account. We're talking $47,000, and served him divorce papers out of nowhere. He's convinced she's trying to take their dog Buster in the settlement, and Buster is literally his best friend. Here's where I messed up. Gary asks if I can help him with something small. He needs a female perspective on some texts Linda sent him because he's too emotional to read them objectively. Red flags should have been everywhere, but this man was so pitiful, standing there in his doorway crying over my cookies, that I said yes. He hands me Linda's phone. Apparently she forgot it when she stormed out that morning after their latest fight, and Gary wanted me to look through her messages to understand what he did wrong and how to win her back. I know this was stupid, but I was already in too deep and Gary was crying again, and I have this fatal flaw where I can't say no to people in crisis. I'm scrolling through, feeling gross about violating someone's privacy, when Linda's phone starts ringing. The contact name that pops up made my stomach drop. Miguel Red Heart Fire 100 Points Eggplant. Obviously the affair partner, and apparently Linda wasn't subtle about it. Without thinking, I panic and answer it. Miguel, Linda baby, I'm outside. Why aren't you answering the door? I brought the champagne like you asked. Me, Linda's not available right now. Miguel, who the hell is this? Where is Linda? Is this some kind of joke? Gary hears this conversation and snatches the phone from my hands. Starts screaming at Miguel about how he destroyed his marriage and ruined his life. Miguel is yelling back, calling Gary crazy. I'm standing there holding my plate of cookies like an idiot while these two grown men have a shouting match through Linda's rose gold iPhone. Then Miguel says the words that changed everything. What marriage? Linda told me she was divorced 6 months ago. She said you were just her crazy ex-roommate. Dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Gary looks at me with this expression of complete bewilderment. I look at Gary. We both look at the phone like it might explode. Turns out Linda had been telling Miguel she was divorced for 8 months. She was planning to take half of everything in the divorce, claimed Gary was financially abusive, hence the cleaned out account, and run off with Miguel to start fresh in another state. Gary wasn't a bad husband who drove his wife to cheat. Linda was just a straight-up sociopath who had been planning this for almost a year. But wait, it gets so much worse. Miguel, now realizing he's been lied to and probably questioning his entire reality, decides he's coming inside to get answers and see what else Linda lied about. Gary starts texting Linda frantically, begging her to come back and explain. I'm trying to leave because this is way above my pay grade, but Gary begs me to stay because he's scared of confrontation, and I seem like I can handle anything. I cannot handle anything. I once cried because I accidentally killed a houseplant. Miguel shows up 15 minutes later. He's like 6 feet 4 inches and looks like he bench presses motorcycles for fun. Full sleeve tattoos, wearing a tank top that shows off arms the size of my torso. He sees me holding Linda's phone and immediately assumes I'm the other woman. Gary tries to explain, but he's stuttering and stumbling over his words. Miguel is getting angrier by the second, and I'm starting to wonder if I should call the police. Then Linda walks in with Starbucks and a smug expression. The silence was deafening. Linda sees Miguel, sees Gary, sees me with her phone, and her face goes through about 12 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, panic, anger, calculation, and finally this weird attempt at playing innocent. Linda, What the hell is going on here? Miguel, why are you in my house? Miguel, your house? You told me you were divorced. You told me Gary was your abusive ex. Gary, abusive? Linda, you cleaned out our bank account. You took money from my mom's birthday fund. Me, I just brought cookies. I can leave. I should definitely leave. What followed was the most insane three-way argument I've ever witnessed in my life. Linda trying to lie her way out of it, making up increasingly ridiculous stories. Miguel realizing he'd been played and getting angrier. Gary finally growing a spine and calling Linda out on every lie. I'm just standing there like a deer in headlights, still holding my stupid cookies, watching this woman's house of cards collapse in real time. Linda tried every manipulation tactic in the book. She cried. She screamed. She tried to turn Miguel against Gary. She tried to make Gary feel guilty. She even tried to claim I had seduced Gary, and we planned this whole thing together. Ma'am, I met your husband 45 minutes ago. Then Miguel drops the nuclear bomb that made my jaw hit the floor. Linda, I already gave my wife the divorce papers because of you. I left my kids for you. I quit my job and moved here for you. Plot twist. Miguel was also married with kids. This man had blown up his entire life, left his wife of 15 years, barely sees his 2 young daughters now, moved 3 states away, all because Linda convinced him she was a soulmate and they were going to start fresh together. The pure devastation on his face when he realized Linda had been lying about literally everything was heartbreaking. At this point, I tried to sneak out because this was getting too intense, but Linda blocks the door and starts screaming at me for going through her private things, ruining her life, and being a nosy bitch who destroyed her happiness. Ma'am, your life was already ruined. You ruined it yourself. Gary, who had been quiet during Linda's tirade, suddenly finds his backbone. In the calmest voice I'd ever heard him use, he tells Linda that he's keeping the house, it was in his name, keeping Buster, keeping all the furniture his grandmother left him, and he's going to tell everyone at their church, her work, and both their families exactly what she did. Linda's face went white. Apparently her whole identity was built on being the perfect Christian wife, and Gary had receipts going back months. Miguel, meanwhile, is having his own breakdown. He starts talking about how he has to call his ex-wife and beg for forgiveness, how his kids won't even talk to him, how he destroyed everything for a lie. It was actually really sad. Linda realizes she's lost control of the situation and grabs her phone from me, but not before I see Miguel texting someone frantically. She follows Miguel out to the parking lot, still screaming at him, trying to convince him that Gary was lying and they could work it out. I'm finally alone with Gary, who looks at me with this shell-shocked expression and goes, "So, want to help me change the locks?" I helped him change the locks and set up security cameras. And when Linda tried to come back the next day with a police escort to get her things, we had everything on video. The cops took one look at the evidence Gary had gathered and told Linda she needed to go through lawyers. Gary's lawyer says it's the best documentation of financial abuse and adultery he's ever seen in a divorce case. Apparently Linda had been sloppy about covering her tracks because she never thought Gary would fight back. Update 1. 3 days later. So Miguel's wife, I'll call her Sarah, found out about everything when Miguel came crawling back begging for forgiveness. Apparently, he confessed everything, including how Linda had convinced him that his marriage was holding him back from his true potential. Sarah was having none of it. Sarah showed up at my door yesterday asking if I wanted to be friends, because apparently I'm the hero who exposed the cheaters, and she wanted to thank me in person. Turns out Miguel had told her the whole story, including how some random neighbor girl accidentally uncovered Linda's lies. Sarah is awesome. She's this tiny firecracker of a woman who works as a nurse and takes exactly zero BS from anyone. She brought wine, and we spent 3 hours talking about the whole mess. Apparently Miguel had been acting sketchy for months, and Sarah knew something was up, but couldn't prove it. The kicker? Sarah is divorcing Miguel too, but she's not angry at me or Gary. She's angry at Linda for being a husband-stealing psychopath, and at Miguel for being a stupid man who threw away his family for a fantasy. Get this, Linda had been telling Miguel that Sarah was mentally unstable and keeping him trapped in a loveless marriage. Meanwhile, Sarah had been going to therapy trying to save their relationship while Miguel was planning his exit strategy. Gary kept Buster, obviously. That dog is living his best life now that the house isn't full of screaming matches. Update 2. 1 week later. So Gary asked me to dinner to thank me properly for helping him through the worst week of his life. I said yes, because honestly, after everything we'd been through together, he felt like a friend. Plus the man needed to get out of the house and eat something that wasn't delivered. We went to this little Italian place downtown, and it was actually really nice. Gary cleaned up well. Turns out when he's not crying and sleep deprived, he's actually pretty cute. We talked for hours about everything except Linda and Miguel. Turns out Gary is hilarious when he's not devastated, and we have a ton in common. But here's where it gets weird. We're walking back to our cars when we see Linda and some new guy at the restaurant across the street. She's already moved on, and is apparently telling this poor dude the same sob story about her abusive ex-husband. Gary and I just looked at each other and started laughing. Like, hysterical laughter in the middle of the sidewalk. The whole situation was so absurd that we couldn't handle it. That's when Gary asked if I wanted to come back to his place and watch a movie. Just as friends, he said, but I could tell there was something more there. I ended up saying yes. Update 3. 2 weeks later. I'm dating my neighbor, and I've never been happier. I know. Don't date someone fresh out of a marriage, rebound relationship, messy situation. I've heard it all from my friends. But here's the thing, Gary and I have been through some serious stuff together, and we know each other in a way that most couples take months to develop. We're taking it slow. Gary's still processing the end of his marriage, and I'm not trying to be his savior or his therapist. We're just two people who like spending time together, and happen to share a wall. Linda tried to cause drama one more time by showing up drunk and crying, claiming she made a mistake and wanted Gary back. Gary very calmly told her that ship had sailed, and if she came back again, he'd call the police for harassment. She hasn't been back since. Sarah and I are actually becoming really good friends. She comes over for wine nights and updates us on her divorce proceedings. Miguel keeps trying to get back together with her, but Sarah is done. She's focusing on her kids and her career and seems really happy. Miguel, from what we've heard, is spiraling. He can't get his old job back, his ex-wife won't take him back, and Linda has blocked him on everything after moving on to her next victim. He's been posting sad poetry on Facebook that Sarah screenshots and sends to us for laughs. Yes, we're being petty. No, I don't feel bad about it. Final update. 1 month later. I'm writing this update from Gary's couch while Buster is trying to steal my sandwich and Gary is making us coffee. The divorce is final. Linda got basically nothing except her personal belongings and her car. Gary kept the house, Buster, all the furniture, and his retirement accounts. The judge was not impressed with Linda's financial shenanigans and adultery, especially when Gary's lawyer presented about 50 pages of evidence including text messages, bank records, and that lovely recorded phone conversation with Miguel. Linda moved back in with her parents in another state. We heard through the grapevine that she's telling everyone she's the victim of an elaborate conspiracy between Gary, me, Miguel's ex-wife, and apparently the entire legal system. Some people will never take responsibility for their actions. Sarah's divorce is almost final too. She's keeping the house, getting alimony, and Miguel has to pay child support. She started dating someone new, a fellow nurse who treats her like a queen. We double date sometimes, which is hilarious because our origin story is so weird. Miguel moved back to his home state and is allegedly living in his brother's basement. Sarah says he keeps sending her long emails about how he lost his way and wants to rebuild their family, but Sarah has moved on completely. Good for her. As for Gary and me, we're happy. Really, genuinely happy. We know each other's worst moments. I've seen him crying over dog custody and he's seen me panic answer a stranger's phone call, and we still like each other. We're talking about me officially moving in when my lease is up, which feels right. Gary proposed we get a second dog, so Buster has a sibling. I'm considering it, but only if we can name it something normal. Gary's naming conventions are questionable at best. The weirdest part of this whole thing is how a random act of kindness, bringing cookies to a crying neighbor, completely changed my life. I gained a boyfriend, a best friend, Sarah, and the wildest story I'll ever have to tell at parties. Oh, and Gary framed the divorce decree and hung it in our bathroom. He says it's a reminder that he dodged a bullet. I think it's tacky, but the man has been through enough, so I let him have his weird victory. Edit. Thanks for all the awards. This has been a wild ride. Edit 2. For everyone asking, yes, the cookies were chocolate chip with sea salt. Yes, I'll share the recipe. No, Linda never got one, but Gary has requested them weekly since this all started. Edit 3. Someone asked if this is real. I wish I was creative enough to make this up. Truth really is stranger than fiction. Edit 4. Gary says hi and wants everyone to know that Buster is indeed the goodest boy.